Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, June 5. I'm Herman Green with the Midday News. A special welcome to those of you watching online at onespotmedia.com. There's more tension brewing in Cassava, St. Andrew following a fatal shooting this morning. The victim has been identified as 23-year-old Lorenzo Thomas, otherwise called Israel or Trulups. It's understood that about 3:30, armed men kicked open the door to Mr. Thomas's house and shot him. They used a machete to chop him several times before setting him ablaze. And two men who appeared in the St. Elizabeth Circuit Court on sexual offense charges were freed yesterday after the complainant told the court she was no longer interested in carrying the case forward. Garfield Rowe and Miguel Myrie were freed of charges of rape, abduction, and grievous sexual assault. No, they were acquitted after the Crown offered no evidence. The men were charged in 2015 after it was reported that on July 1 that year, they abducted and raped the complainant. In acquitting the two, Justice Glenn Brown said they should be thankful that the complainant, after almost 3 years, had decided to pardon them. Now, Justice Glenn Brown lamented the fact that St. Elizabeth has been seeing too many sexual offense cases, especially involving victims below the age of 16 years old. The man believed to be of unsound mind who chopped a physically challenged man in Warwick, South Manchester last week remains on the run. The accused has been identified as Howard Monroe. 30-year-old Hainsworth Porter's body was found inside his house, decapitated sometime after 9 Friday morning. Residents say Monroe forced open the door to Mr. Porter's room and chopped him to death. Another man who was also chopped and injured minutes afterwards is said to be recovering well. He received chop wounds to his fingers as he tried to fend off his attacker. The police are asking residents to alert them if the accused is spotted and not to take matters into their own hands. Meanwhile, mental health professionals say people with mental health issues are still struggling to reintegrate into society. The issue was highlighted on TVJ's Smile Jamaica program this morning, where suggestions were made on how the problem can be addressed. The details from TVJ's O'Shane Masters.
There is a long-standing stereotype about persons with mental illness, which causes these individuals to struggle to integrate into society. According to Acting Director of Health Service, Planning and Integration at the Ministry of Health, Dr. Judith Leiber-Thomas, a smooth transition into society is what will help to keep these persons healthy.
The problem is convincing the rest of society and getting our communities, our societies involved, because mental health is not just health. We need our, like anybody else, they need a place to live. People need a place to live. They need jobs to do. They need friends. They need support. So it's really kind of getting the whole of the community, the whole of the society to be involved in this process of keeping that particular group healthy.
Secretary General for the Lisbon Institute for Global Mental Health, Professor Benito Saracino, says it's a problem he sees globally, adding that he has seen mental health care facilities treating mentally ill persons inhumanely.
I think that still people suffering from mental health problems or mental disabilities are exposed to important violation of their human rights. So the stigma is in the society, but the stigma is also in the provider of psychiatric care.
Dr. Leiber-Thomas said her organization will be doing a sensitization project within the communities with the aim of reducing the number of cases.
We are also formulating a destigmatization, discrimination campaign so that we can try to reach the common man to say, look, mental illness is very similar to physical illness. And the same way that we're talking about Jamaica moves and trying to decrease NCDs, the same way we need to have a similar approach to mental illness.
O'Shane Masters, TVJ News.
Residents in Mount Edgecombe in St. Anne are demanding that a promise made to them by their political representative years ago be honored. The promise was for a new health center. They say the promise and initial steps were made over 2 years ago, but until now, nothing. TVJ Shamela Mitchell has their story.
The Runaway Bay Health Center has been around for many years. However, over the years, the facility has fallen into disrepair in some areas. Persons who depend on that facility are now complaining about the poor services they are getting. Andre Thompson lives in Mount Edgecombe, about 5 minutes from the Runaway Bay Health Center. Mr. Thompson says he has a medical condition that requires him visiting the doctor at least 3 times per week. However, the Runaway Bay Health Center does not offer the services he needs.
I'm unemployed. So challenging, I feel beg off here, I wash a car, I clean up, I sweep up a yard or something to get a fare.
Checks with Regional Director for Northeast Regional Health Authority, Dr. Patrick Wheatle, revealed that the care Mr. Thompson needs would not have been offered at Runaway Bay because it is a Type 2 health center, meaning it is limited in some of its service offerings. The center focuses primarily on curative and maternal care. But even so, there are also complaints about the services offered in maternal care.
Whole heap of community in our you know, and when whole heap of pregnant lady go pack up one place out there, so you understand, it's like a crab in a barrel thing. You understand, people are fight for number. You understand, and rain start fall, people have to scatter to go shelter. Remember, a pregnant lady we are talking about, you understand?
Which is why they are calling for the new health center that was promised to them. They're even more dismayed as a groundbreaking sermon in 2016 had given them great expectation.
You're right here, so you do best we right now in the community.
But according to Dr. Wheatle, the Runaway Bay Health Center is not the #1 priority at this time.
What we need to appreciate though is that the funding has to be something that has to be sought and approved. Not at the regional level, but at a higher level. However, when we look, for example, at the region, whilst we have a facility at Runaway Bay, within the region, we have other facilities that need a little more attention, which poses a greater risk in terms of patients and staff health and health care.
Dr. Wheatle says outside of the region, there are other major issues that the Ministry of Health is now addressing, and the money has to be pumped there. However, he encouraged persons to still access the health center as their needs will be assessed and a decision taken by healthcare professionals. Shamela Mitchell, TVJ News.
The Emergency Powers Review Tribunal for the State of Public Emergency in St. James is to resume sittings today. Objections from 8 detainees whose detention orders were signed by the National Security Minister in April and gazetted are to be heard over the next 2 weeks. 14 detention orders were signed by the minister and gazetted. The police have said these persons are being investigated for serious crimes. Chairman of the tribunal, Ian Wilkinson, gave TVJ News an update this morning.
We understand that further objections will be filed in relation to those 14 detainees. We also gather that an application has been made to the ministry for a further 7 detention orders for different individuals.
The tribunal has not met since April. Sittings were halted due to concerns about unsigned detention orders and the implication for decisions of the tribunal. Jamaicans in the diaspora and at home are being called on to help to drive the country's economic growth. The call comes from motivational speaker and radio host Dennis D. Grant. He was speaking at the 63rd Awards Luncheon of the St. Anne Chamber of Commerce recently. Mr. Grant noted that despite the rate of crime and unemployment in the country, it is not as bad as in the U.S.
Within the first 21 weeks of 2018, we have had a number of school shootings in the United States. 23 incidents were reported where the young was either killed or hurt, with the closest that happened on Valentine's Day, only 10 minutes from where I live and work.
The notion that the grass is green on the other side is not always applicable. He says, as a country, we must be proud of what has been accomplished, as Jamaica is a paradise compared to the United States.
And when you think that it is greener on the other side of the United States, it's not always greener. Life can be better right here in Jamaica.
The Ministry of Labour is reporting that it is unable to intervene in the strike which has brought a halt to the Mandela Highway improvement project in St. Catherine. It says it has not received a formal report on the work stoppage. Permanent Secretary in the Ministry, Colette Roberts-Risen, last night told our news centre that the workers who are employed to China Harbour Engineering Company, CHEC, the contractor on the project, have not taken steps to raise the issue. The protest has caused a shutdown of work on the highway and put the August completion target in jeopardy. Mrs. Roberts' residence says while formal channels for complaints to the ministry have not been engaged, the matter has caught its attention.
I checked with my officers and we have not had a formal complaint from any worker on the site that they have been short paid or have not received pay. So the dispute is not before us at this point in time. Notwithstanding that, though, based on the complaints that were in the media on Friday, our occupational safety and health officers have gone back to the site.
Business owners in Port Maria, St. Mary will soon have to adopt to a new concept being implemented by the St. Mary Municipal Corporation, which requires all business places to number their establishment. The announcement was made by Mayor of Port Maria, Richard Creary, while speaking at the recent groundbreaking ceremony for the Port Maria market.
We believe that the police looking for a particular location on Senate Street shouldn't have to be walking what number, where is number 10, where is number 5. And similarly, our citizens, we have done the design already, and we are doing the research. We have gotten the plans from NLA as to the exact numbers, and we will be numbering all our business places in the town of Port Maria, and then we will take that into the other towns, and we'll be going into housing schemes and everywhere, because we believe that each place should have a civic address. If the fire department is looking for an address, they must be able to find it.
An estate planning consultant is again seeking to raise awareness about the importance of making a will in light of an increasing number of families facing challenges after the death of a loved one. She says most persons don't understand the law and the stresses surviving relatives can face in the absence of a will. For estate planning consultant Denise Henry, far too many Jamaicans are still reluctant to make a will or simply don't understand the Wills Act. From her experience, this leaves families in turmoil, as sometimes the government gets the assets of the deceased relatives. The reasons she gets for the reluctance vary.
You don't want to come to me to do your will, because if you come to me to do your will, you feel as you go through the door, you're going to die. Then I have other persons for religious purposes, like the Rastafarians, who are going to tell me what? We don't believe in dead left, so they're not going to have the will. Or this is the popular one. Miss Henry, I don't own anything. I don't need no will. Or you know what? Let them fight over it.
She notes that even the fighting over it may not work out in their favor, as death taxes ranging from 15 to 17% of the estate accumulates with interest during the fighting. Speaking at the recent Mayberry Investment Forum in Kingston, Ms. Henry pointed out that when one dies without a will or intestate, the Intestate Estate and Property Changes Act governs the asset distribution, which she says favors the surviving spouse.
They are going to get all the personal chattels, absolutely. What do I mean by that? It's defined by statute to be china, linen, crockery, artwork, painting, motor vehicle not used for business purposes, money in the bank not used for business purposes. And all of that belongs to the surviving spouse outright.
Contrary to most beliefs, children are considered secondary under the Act.
If you have more than one child, she then gets half of the residue, and your 5 children share in the other half of the residue. If you have one child, the surviving spouse now gets 2/3 of the residue, and your one child gets 1/3. All right, so all of this is happening. Why? Just because you died without the will.
She also warns that only if there are no children are the parents of the deceased taken into consideration. The surviving spouse then shares the estate, receiving 2/3, while the parents get 1/3. If there's no spouse or children, the parents get everything. No surviving parents, siblings are next in line. No siblings, then grandparents, then uncles and aunts. None of the above, the government takes it all.
You notice who you didn't see? Grandchildren, nieces, nephews, and cousins. They're just disinherited. They get nothing. So you realize that even if you may have said, which is what usually happens, I have a relative who's been raised by the nieces or the nephews or a cousin, they don't even qualify under the Intestates Act.
And that's the Midday News. I'm Herman Green. Join us at 7 for the Primetime News Package. On behalf of the News, Sports and Production teams, good afternoon.